Hello, friends. Today's big question of the day: how do we start reading the Bible? A lot of us want to read the Bible. We think there's probably value in reading the Bible, but we don't even know kind of how to put this thing together, this couple of thousand pages of Scripture. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to start with a verse that everybody should know about Scripture, and that's, well, two verses, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. And those verses tell us this: all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. What that means is wherever you read in the Bible, it's from the mouth and the mind of God. And because it's from the mouth and the mind of God, it's perfect and it's fruitful. We see elsewhere in Scripture that when we speak Scripture, it does not return void. So we can never lose that. We don't have to obsess about getting the right combination about how to read. However, it's still useful to have some understanding of the Bible. And what I'm going to leave you with today is just 7 different types of Scripture, 7 different types of books of the Bible that'll help us when we're in those books to understand what to do with them. The first type we see is historical narrative. So that would be, Genesis, Exodus, 1st and 2nd Samuel, these kind of books that tell us about the history of people, of God's people, and just people in general. So those are meant to be literal, they're meant to be historical, and they are. They're true in everything that they say. So that's the first type. The second type is sort of a legal codes when we look at a book like Leviticus or Deuteronomy. There are some history in there, but a lot of it is explaining the rules and regulations that govern the people of Israel and their worship and their society, and help understand the morals of God and the character of God. That's the second type. Third type, we have wisdom literature. So we have the Psalms and the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs, different books that are really conveying the wisdom of God to his people and preparing his people for living in the world and making their way or preparing their souls for heaven. They don't save themselves, but it helps them to know what God's will is in their life. So that's the wisdom literature. Then we have prophetic literature. That's books of the prophets talking about things that are going to happen in the short term and talking about things that are going to happen in the long term. After that, we have apocalyptic literature, which is like prophecy, but usually just reserved for Revelation, talking about end times, eschatology, we call that. Then we have biographies, really the biography of Jesus that we find in the Gospels. And we also would call the book of Acts something like that, where it's giving us a history of the life of Jesus and the early church as it relates to Acts. And then finally, we have letters. And I don't know about you, but for me, letters was the hardest to kind of understand, because what it is now that all the history was there, now that all the prophecy was there, and that all of that history and prophecy was fulfilled in Jesus, we have these letters like 1st and 2nd Timothy, which we just read from, or Romans, all these different letters from Paul and other apostles teaching the church how to behave and how to think and how to exist in this world in light of all the truth of everything that came before it. So if I were you, where would I start? I'd start in the book of John. Get a biography of the life of Jesus. Figure out who the centerpiece of Scripture is. And from there, start exploring these other books. Maybe read a letter. Maybe read Paul's letter to the Romans next. And then maybe go back, now that we kind of know what everything's pointing to, now go back to Genesis and start reading the early accounts of God's people. And you'll start to see Jesus or allusions to Jesus in those early writings, because he's the focus of the entire Bible. And the more you can understand that, the more you're going to understand Scripture. I hope this is useful. God bless.